I'll record this. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, being here for IDFI's Tune and Pull Up event. We have Joshua Henry Jenkins here with us from the Arts Administrators of Color Network. I'm Victoria. I'm one of the co-creators of IDFI and the producer of our upcoming performance this Wednesday of Rainfall Special on Me by Lane Michael Stanley, directed by Graham Schmidt, the proceeds of which will be benefiting AAC. So we're super happy to have this conversation today all about arts administrators. So I'd love to first have Graham and Maya introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background in arts administration. Graham and Maya are our IDFI panelists tonight. Whoever wants to start.
I'll jump in. My name is Graham Schmidt. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I'm a Brooklyn-based theater director, freelance, and I've been in Brooklyn for about just over 2 years after I finished grad school in 2018 at the University of Texas at Austin. My relationship with arts administration right now is as a small fish in the giant ocean of New York City, but you know, in that capacity, I interact with, connect with, and network with arts administrators all the time, and encounter them when I've been working on productions, obviously. I also have a background as I founded and ran a small theater company in Austin, Texas for about 7 years that was based around Russian theater. And yeah, that was kind of the first act of my career that started in about 2005. So that's where I am, and that's me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. And Maya.
Hey, I'm Maya Quetzali Gonzalez, pronouns she, her, hers. I am a recent graduate of NYU School of the Arts Drama Department. I worked in arts administration at the Public Theater over the past year, both in production management and at the Public Shakespeare Initiative, where I interned. Right now, I'm working at the MAP Fund as the Program Outreach Associate. The MAP Fund has been around for about 30 years. It's like one of the oldest philanthropic arts organizations, and it funds projects that challenge or dismantle canon and convention. I'm so excited to be here too.
Awesome. Thank you, Maya. And Graham is directing our performance of Rainfall Special on Me, and Maya is voicing stage directions in that reading on Wednesday. Yay, so thank you for being here. And Joshua, if you'd like to also introduce yourself, and also if you could tell us a little bit about the work and mission of the Arts Administrators of Color Network, especially what y'all have been doing during the pandemic, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I am Joshua Jenkins, he, him, and his. I am currently the Director of Web and New Media Strategies for Americans for the Arts, which is a national advocacy organization that also professionally develops and supports a membership of what I'll call local arts agencies or other sort of arts organizations around the country. So I do like web, video, fun stuff for them. During the day. And then I'm a king of many side hustles, as many of us are. So I am the board chair for the Arts Administrators of Color Network, in addition to freelancing as a web designer and graphic designer, doing my own little like design things on my own for fun. And then also just recently co-created a bi-weekly Black queer film space called Black Gay Stuck at Home, where we showcase Black queer film every 2 weeks in a Zoom call. And we, have a live chat that kind of goes along with that. Kind of was a weird thing where we just wanted a couple of friends to get in a thing, and now we get a couple of hundred folks in the room every 2 weeks to chat through Black queer film. And then sometimes the people in the films come, which is really cool. So that's been kind of jarring. So that's sort of my passion project in addition to AAC. AAC's literally like another full-time job for me, but we're a working board, we're a volunteer organization. We are all hands on deck as a a mighty team of less than 20. But we are what I'll call an art service organization, but we focus around some pillar programming, which is mostly, it's all geared towards BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, people of color, who are identified as artists or arts leaders. We do professional development, so that, manifests as workshops, now webinars. It's all webinars now. We have networking events, so we do a lot of happy hours, a lot of affinity space kind of moments for folks across identities. We have a mentorship program which connects a small cohort of mentees with experienced arts leaders who are also of color. We have our annual convening, which happens every fall, which we're gearing up for, which is a 2-day event that's grown exponentially over the last couple of years with the need for that kind of connection and learning together for BIPOC arts leaders. We have a podcast, myself and the founder, where we talk shit about arts administration, once a month. And then we just recently started or piloting, actually at this very moment, I believe it might have wrapped up for the day, the Accomplices Leadership Institute, which is our sort of initiative to make sure that we are creating frameworks for folks to move through anti-racism kind of training, as folks have identified their desire to be accomplices in the work we're doing. All of that, and then we, decided we were going to make sure we had an appropriate response to the COVID crisis. So we decided to start an emergency fund, which specifically targets the artists and arts leaders who identify as BIPOC, so that they are able to receive $200 micro grants. So anything that comes in that we generate, we immediately, as soon as we possibly logistically, administratively can, we get it back out to the folks in order of how folks have applied. So we've raised something like, I don't know, probably $80,000, which is massive for a little organization like us. But to contrast that with the number of people who've applied and expressed need, that's something like 12 or 13,000. So you do the math. I'm not a math person, but it's a lot more than 80,000. So we're fast working and sort of indefinitely moving through the emergency fund world until we can, every penny in can go back out to somebody. So as long as people are giving, we'll be giving it back. So yeah, that's a overarching sort of understanding of what AAC does, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. That is quite a crash course. Really incredible programming. Thank you for being here. We're super happy to be supporting AAC. And to sort of jump into our conversation today, Graham spoke very beautifully in an email to me about the shifting roles of arts administrators as of late. And so I'd love to pose that to all of y'all. Like, what has the job of arts administrators been in the past, and where are those jobs going, / where do you hope that they will be going in the near future as well? If anyone wants to jump in.
Thanks for the compliment. I was really just referring to, it feels like we're seeing a new generation of BIPOC leaders occupy pretty lofty positions in the American theater. And, like Nataki, Garrett Myers at OSF, Stephanie Ibarra, Maria Guyanis in DC, and Eric Ting out in the Bay Area, among many others. And that's not to say that there haven't been before. But I think also, especially with the We See You White American Theater initiative, it feels like a really kind of exciting, bracing time of not just crisis, but enormous opportunity to reimagine the role of arts leaders and institutions. And I think what springs to mind for me is, and this I just want to lift up what Maya has been up to, because Maya, and you could talk about this more, but led this effort to ensure that the public theater opened its doors to people who were protesting in New York City, and that was part of a domino effect of other theaters as well, aligning themselves with people who are actually protesting on the streets. But I think it's like my not being an arts administrator myself, but it feels like there's this message that arts administrators are being challenged, especially at predominantly white institutions, to reconsider whether or not they're serving their communities and the artists, or if they're serving the institutions. And I think that's a really important conversation that's exciting to see. Yeah, that's my general perspective on this stuff. I'm really excited to hear what Maya and Josh have to say about those issues.
Yeah, thanks, Graham.
It's always fun because I never know when to jump in. I'm like, okay.
Everyone's watching for the mute to go away.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said. I think traditionally arts administration has been well, first of all, we have to clearly sort of define what arts administration is, or like, or get comfortable with the idea that maybe it's not what we think it is, or everybody can have their own sort of definition of what it is. Because I think when you look at academic programs and, you know, folks who go get their master's in arts administration, it looks a particular kind of way. The pathway or the trajectory is like development, or, you know, EDing a company, like these kinds of sort of traditional roles, whereas I've got a bit more of a scaled back understanding of arts administration. As anybody who's working to support the art in my brain is at some point an arts administrator. But I do believe that the role of arts administration and folks who call themselves and fall into arts administration roles are being pushed, and rightfully so, to make sure that they are able to connect what they're doing back to the communities that need to be served, and less around the institution that needs to hit its bottom line or get its butts in its seats and those kinds of things. And I welcome all that kind of disruption. That's what I kind of love the most, is when we demand more and demand responsibility and accountability in ways that fall outside of sort of bullets on a job description, and deal with people and communities and impact. And so I think that is something fascinating to watch happen. About a year ago, I remember having a conversation on our podcast with Quetzali, the founder of AAC, and explicitly saying that we were seeing sort of these hires happen, these beautiful, like, new, exciting, wonderful voices going into leadership positions. And I was like, this is amazing. Thank God. Like, some of those folks that you mentioned, I live in DC most of the time. I'm in North Carolina now. But some of those folks coming immediately into the DC community, which was so exciting. But immediately my mind went to, oh my God, I hope they're supported. Oh my God, I hope the institutions that they're going into are going to support them in a way that allows them to be successful and allows their voices to be heard. Because I think we were seeing a bit of a tokenizing thing happen with the field, where they were saying, oh, the demand is that we hire folks of color. The demand is that we make sure we've got marginalized voices at the top. So we're going to hire here, but we're not going to change anything about our institution or the way that we run to make sure that those folks can thrive and be successful. And so fast forward to now, and I think we're now seeing a wave of, no, your institutions, now we're going to deconstruct you too, which is, I'm like, thank God. Like the We See You White American Theater sort of is a great example of that, of saying, okay, now we've said we need a leadership, but now we need to like talk through all of the rest of it and completely gut how we do what we do. And so it's strange and feels uncomfortable, but it's also like the most exciting thing, I think, right now, to see what could be on the other end of it for the art, but also for the folks who work to support the art.
I totally agree with all of that too. And I think I don't remember where I heard it, but sometime in the past week, I was listening to a podcast or a talk or something, and someone was talking about institutions and how institutions are ultimately set up to resist change, and to uphold a set of standards that are often outdated. And I'm thinking about how much uncomfortable radical change there will need to be within institutions. And I'll speak a little bit about MAP and what we did this year, because we usually give out around 40 grants, ranging from $10,000 to $50,000, $45,000 every year, which is like 4% of the people who apply. And this year there was a big shift because of the pandemic, and instead we funded 171 projects at much smaller grants. But it was just just broadening that scope and saying like, we know that there's a good chance that you're not working on this project right now, but at the same time, like, there is still value in the fact that you wanted to do it, and like your art and like being should have that inherent value right now, and like we will fund you. And I think that there needs to be like a huge reckoning with how we fund the arts, how we produce the arts, and also thinking about Brian Joseph Lee at the Public Theater is incredible. Shout out to him. But he recently did a working group with a bunch of people from like multiple theaters, a bunch of people of color. And one of the things we talked about, quite a few people were administrators, was how do we like undo the white supremacy culture that we have inside, and like what is it to really like reckon with our own internalization of that, and not just expect institutions to give that to us. And like, even when we're calling for institutional change, like when are we calling for things that will actually make a change, and when are we calling for things that seem comfortable from like our positions to call for?
Thank you, Maya. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone else have anything else to add?
Also, another shout out to Brian Joseph Lee, who is my ex-boyfriend, but is amazing. The world is this small. I swear it is. It's this small. And I have no problem saying that on a broadcasted Zoom call. He and I were great, but like he does amazing. And we need folks like Brian at institutions. You know, I mean, the public is an amazing, place, and so many folks need to model themselves after something like the public, but we need folks like Brian at all the places that are less like the public, so that they can start to adopt some of those things, I think, with less pushback, and they don't have to get over their own stuff to get things done like that. So, so yes, kudos to Brian.
It is a small world. That's awesome. Great. Well, then why don't I know that one of the core, you already kind of talked about this, Joshua, but one of the core facets of AAC really is networking and providing opportunities for BIPOC artists and arts administrators to have opportunities for networking. And so I'm curious, like, this is an interesting group because we have a recent graduate, we have somebody, an educator, Graham. We also have, obviously, oh, my Siri thing is going crazy. We also obviously have Joshua, who is the board chair of AAC. So I'd love to sort of hear from y'all what y'all think are effective ways to network, particularly in COVID times, and particularly for arts administrators, for people who are working, not necessarily for the actors and the directors, but for those arts administrator positions.
Networking now feels like support groups to me.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do, networking wise, it's less, I need to know you because you're going to help me kind of networking, and more like we are of similar experience, and therefore like I want to honor your experience while you can help me honor mine, and we can move through, especially what is a pandemic together. So a lot of our networking has shifted from like traditional, obviously in-person things like, networking hours and stuff, to we have a weekly happy hour that happens over Zoom, that is specifically for BIPOC folks, but it's usually quite intergenerational, and sort of, which is, I think, part of that process, is making sure that you've got sort of folks across generations in the room. And it's literally a space where we can talk about whatever. Obviously, work comes up a lot. Obviously, the state of the field, what's happening personally and professionally come out of that. But a lot of really interesting shared experiences end up being unpacked in those spaces, and then a lot of folks take that offline and then create connections separately. We're at a really unique place where we can access people from all over using Zoom, right? Like, and so I know we have Zoom fatigue. I feel it every day. This is like my 17th call on Zoom today, probably, but like it is this wonderful unifier right now that allows networking to happen in a way that doesn't, that's not predicated on an ability to be in a physical space with one another. And so as much as people can use that and the platforms available to be able to do that, but in a way that feels much more genuine and much more checking in oriented, and being able to create space for one another to unpack what's happening, I think the better, because we start to really sort of see where the overlap is. Before we could go get off on a, how are you doing? I'm fine. How are you doing? I'm fine. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of jobs and work. But now people are making much deeper connections with each other, because before we get to that, we also need to unpack like a pandemic and a movement for racial justice and all of the other things happening in the world on top of that. So networking is still important, but I think it just looks different now. It has to look different.
Jumping off of that, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that I found really interesting as like a way to find community at this moment is through activism, like with other people, and like reaching out to people. I'm doing a phone bank right after this. And I'm like, I reached out to a bunch of my friends who are more like colleagues, I think, than like mentors, and said like, will you do this with me? And there's a great group, Amplifying Activists Together. I just looked it up. That always doing a big push to defund the NYPD. And that was a great space to like, it was really exciting for me, at least as a young person, to get into and be like, oh, there's all these directors and like writers are like, I really admire, and they're all on the Zoom and we're all making calls together for the same thing. And I think I'm outside of my arts administration, I am also a freelance director and choreographer, which is what I studied at NYU. And I am a big advocate always for just asking for things from people. That's how I got to know Graham. I Facebook messaged him and I was like, hi, I'm a director. Like we met once, like for 2 seconds, can we please get coffee? And it turned out great, I think. And so I'm definitely like always like trying to push like my friends, particularly like my other women of color, to always go after things that they would like and like always ask for things and people like say yes so much. And also right now I'm talking to a couple of different people in the industry about like what is it to create a larger mentorship program, like specifically with people in high school, people of color in high school, who like have ambitions to be arts administrators or artists, and what that might look like on a bigger scale, and like how we can pass on the knowledge that we have received. Because I think that a huge barrier that a lot of people of color do face in the industry is just not having that kind of mentorship or generational knowledge of my parents weren't Broadway producers. They don't even, they've seen like one play before I got into theater. How do I do this?
That's all brilliant, and I'm so grateful to be in community with Maya. It's been a huge gift. I also, for me, echoing a lot of what both of you said, I've found that a lot of the networking that I'm doing is much less structured and it's not project-based. It's just reaching out to somebody. I mean, with playwrights, I have a lot more opportunity to just ask hey, have you got something laying around that you would like some eyes on? Playwrights love that. That's something I figured out a few years ago. But I would also say, like, as a cishet white middle-class man, there's been part of what is clearly necessary in this moment is for white people who aspire to be allies or accomplices to do a lot of study and deepen and sharpen their own analyses, and that can take the form of reading really often. So I've found, especially connecting with other like-minded white people, I found a lot of community connecting about books that can help me accomplish those kinds of analysis deepening, whether that's history or reading a lot of August Wilson, or there's a ton of amazing amazing supporting literature about. I'm just on an August Wilson kick right now. I'm just like, that's what I'm completely immersed in. But yeah, sustaining those kinds of conversations, especially with other white people, has been a source of community during this time.
I think there's also something about folks with privileges being able to help make space for a lot of what Maya was saying. So oftentimes I think we're left to do that for ourselves, whereas I wonder what it might look like if organizations, as you know, big organizations in particular, as well as like leaders at those organizations and leaders in the field who carry a lot of privileges are able to help carve out lanes and make space for folks to be able to have. I mean, I'm talking about bare bones stuff, right? Like I'm talking about like, do you have a Zoom license? I'm talking like, you know, lots of things that carry financial costs or carry particular hurdles and burdens that make it difficult for folks to even gather and have a conversation like we're having right now, right? So I wonder and imagine a universe where that can actually happen in this time too, is folks can actually start to leverage a lot of the things that they already have and start to understand, okay, I've got a 1,000-person Zoom license here. Who can I help, you know, create space for with it and see where it goes, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Oh yeah, Maya, please go ahead.
Going off of that, I think that I've really noticed people specifically right now, but I think that for the last like 4 years I was in college, being very generous with their time. And I think that that's another thing that we can like definitely continue to do, especially right now when so many people I think have a lot of time. Like I don't have to be on the subway every day, and like that is so much time. Yes, thinking about how we can continue to do that and continue to prioritize those kind of relationships as we move forward.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's so true. We're all four of us, I even think right now, are in completely different parts of the country. And we've been thinking about that a lot too. And we've been casting the performances we've been doing. When is this opportunity ever going to be here again for us to be able to assemble the groups that we are assembling with no problems? So yeah, I agree. That's really amazing to hear about all of the things that we could be doing right now that might not be possible once we're all back in or not post-COVID world, but you know, a different world than we're in now. So thank you. And kind of just a last thing to talk about. I know we already sort of talked a little bit about the idea of representation in the theater and specifically in positions of leadership. And so I'd just love to pose the question of what does representation in the theater actually look like to you? Like, what does that really look like? And kind of a big, broad question, what are your hopes for the future of the industry? I'd love to hear from y'all about that.
I'll take a crack at it. I mean, I think
it's a big question. It's a big question.
Yeah, no, representation in the theater looks like and calls for a complete reorganization of what we think of as what the majority is, what mainstream is, what the prevailing discourse should be. I mean, I feel like you know what it means to talk about our history as Americans. I think as exciting as this moment is, like it's also just, if you look like the We See You White American Theater, I mean we're at this exciting moment. We have these BIPOC leaders who are ascending to positions of influence, or at least that we see very visibly. You know, a queer black man just won the Pulitzer Prize for you know, Michael R. Jackson won for A Strange Loop. You know, and but at the same time, like we're also, if you go to the We See White American Theater page, the list of demands for institutional change is 31 pages, single space. And it was like, and so there's just so much that is left to do. I also, the institution that I'm most closely attached to right now or involved with in have a lot of contact with is Brooklyn College, where I'm an adjunct teacher. I teach acting in the BFA program. And there was an enormous reckoning happening there with regard to how we teach the, we were supposed to have a town hall in like mid-May that was going to be about what next year might look like if we don't have a live performance season, if we're going to teach remotely, learn remotely, and try to bring all the stakeholders who are going to think about that into a Zoom call with like 60 people, staff, students, teachers. And then it was scheduled for like June 1st, and then George Floyd was murdered in late May, so they pushed it back and back. And then when we finally had the meeting in like mid-June, it became, I thought, one of the healthiest, most kind of important, vibrant conversations, because it was people that had been experiencing the kind of everyday racism at that institution, where I'm lucky to still have a job, but like they're it's very steeped in the white canon. It's a place where there's a lot of emphasis on what we think of as craft and technique, which also has certain valences. But there was just like a lot of outcry, and it's a CUNY school, so we mostly have BIPOC students, but almost the administration is mostly white. So that's what does it look like? It looks like every single institution at every layer possibly failing and making way for something much healthier and more vibrant, more equitable, but also something that reflects the world around us. Something that allows us to tell stories that actually heal, that actually address what is going on immediately outside these institutions, that like it provides healthy spaces that don't suck to a BIPOC artist. That's a fully liberated American theater, which would go along with a fully liberated American society. That would be awesome, and it feels like we can all work for it.
Thanks, Graham.
Such a hard question. That was a beautiful answer. I was scribbling notes because I was like, I all these things came into my brain. The future looks, I'm just going to read what I wrote. It's just a couple of like sort of, random statements. It looks like it's representative of the place we live, the places we live. I think that's like not a blanket term, right? Like if you live in New York, your institutions need to look like what New York looks like. If I'm in rural North Carolina right now, I'm in, a land that is rich with indigenous folks. It's also rich with histories of oppression against Black people. The institutions here need to be reflective of the very interesting history and makeup of the folks that live here. So like, that is one thing, right? I hate to say diversity, but it is that. It is the richness of where we are. It looks like reparations. It looks like restorative justice. It looks like acknowledgement that we can't go forward until institutions acknowledge how they've played parts in a lot of the systemic issues that are that a lot of these institutions are saying that they're trying to fight. Like we have to also acknowledge, what institutions have done and how they've played parts in that. It looks like demands, but it also looks like us answering the question of what happens when we don't get them or if we don't get them. There's been a lot of, rightfully so, a lot of letters, a lot of signatory sort of action. And I'm all for that, but I'm now in this phase of, well, what happens if we don't get it? What are we willing to say we're not going to be doing anymore? And how does that show up if we don't get what we ask for? And then let's see, it centers joy and it avoids re-traumatizing BIPOC people. I think we are at that point where we are constantly seeing that folks of color, especially in the art itself and how the art is being presented are oftentimes being asked to digest the same kinds of stories and not understanding and seeing the richness and fullness of our lives and experiences on stages. So I wonder what the future looks like if we center joy for BIPOC people. That's a lot of what we do with AAC, or we try to do, is our networking doesn't look like networking for that very reason. We want laughter, we want music, we want dance, we want celebration. Because even in the shittiest of times, we still have many, many, many things to be celebrating. And it's holistic in that it absolutely, the future is all of those things for the things we put on stage, but the things behind the scenes. It's for the development intern, it's for the marketing and communications manager, it's for the social media person, it's for all of arts administration, so that we can create a future that feels like it is something that we want other BIPOC folks to join in on. To be honest, I don't know how I've possibly recommended arts administration as a field for people, because it is one of the least diverse. Ask anybody who's worked in development, for instance, like one of the least diverse sort of lines of work you can go into. And so I would love if the future was less of that and more of all of that other stuff I just named off. Thanks for listening to my ramble.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Maya.
I absolutely love what you're saying about more joy and more celebration. And I'm thinking, I have like so many thoughts right now, and I'm going to say them in an order that might not make sense, but it's gonna happen. My first thought is that I have had months where I just have not thought at all about like representation. Like that's not something that's like kind of been on my mind at all, because I think I've been like deep diving into prison and police abolition. And I think that I'm seeing like how much larger the world is than like the arts sector, and like how I think it's all of our responsibilities to like undo that as well, along with our arts work. And like Mariam Kaba, who's like this fantastic abolitionist, she says that abolition is recontextualizing our relationships with each other at its core. And I love how much that can be applied to arts and arts administration. And I think that's something that I'm incredibly grateful for right now, is that everyone at MAP is like, particularly our executive director, is so open and generous, both in terms of like pay, in terms of like what they like, I'm getting healthcare, I love that. And like just so many other things that I was so often told in school and growing up, like, you will never get this in the arts, and like this is not something that's possible. And I think also I read all the 171 proposals that MAP got in this year, that got grants. I don't pick them, but I just had to read them for like a different assignment. And one of the things that I was like most struck by was like the prioritization of this joy and of people's well-being in the field, and how that is inextricably, like, it's just completely linked to the amount of representation that we can have in this field. Like, for example, if you say that you want someone with a disability to be in your show, but you don't provide them with all of these like very important structural things that they need, like, you're never going to get that representation. There's this fantastic grantee this year called Access Centered Movement, that I talk to everyone about because I'm obsessed with them, and their proposal. And they have so many things that had never crossed my mind that come out of disability justice, and that allow this kind of representation to happen, and say, if you want someone with a wheelchair, are all your spaces accessible? If you have someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, like, do you have an interpreter there? These are not things that should just sort of be last minute thoughts or put onto arts administration or artists, but things that we have to like really integrate into all of our systems in order to make them better. And I think my other floating thought is that I think when I was in high school, I was like very obsessed. I feel so young. When I was in high school, I was like super obsessed. I used to be an actor, and I was like oh, like I want someone who like looks like me on stage. Like I want that so badly. I want someone who has a story like me. And I think that as I've gone through college and as I've kind of been thinking a lot about the uprisings that are happening over the past couple of months, and also thinking a lot about how I'm Mexican American and I'm dealing with a lot of reckoning within like non-Black Latino spaces right now about our anti-Blackness. But I think on top of our anti-Blackness, like there are so many things that we are also failing at, like I mean, disability justice, you know, supporting LGBTQ people, having a lot of really rough conversations with my family about all of that stuff. And I think that there has to be something about representation too, that is not just self-serving. It can't just be about your representation. It has to be about who else am I bringing up with me? Oh, I forgot who said this, but there's someone, there's a fantastic, I listened to a podcast with her, and she uses the phrase lifting as we climb, which is also the title of her book. I'm blanking on her name right now, but I just love that image. And I think that, and I hope that when theater does open, or even if it takes a long time, like in that space, that we are finding ways to like prioritize people's well-being and prioritize the human relationship, because I don't think that there will ever be a moment where we get the theater or the arts to look like the world that we want it to on every level. Like if you're not mirroring that in your meetings, in your rehearsal rooms, and how do you expect the lawmakers to be practicing those same things?
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone else have anything to add to that? Awesome. Great. Well, we're sort of coming to the end of our time, but that entire conversation really filled me up. That was really beautiful. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Joshua, for being here tonight and for chatting with us. This was a really amazing discussion. And we're very honored to have been able to take part in it with y'all. And, you know, it's important and we hope it continues to happen. And also, just a little plug, make sure that you purchase your tickets for Rainfall Special on Me this Wednesday, the proceeds of which are going to benefit the Arts Administrators of Color Network and the Ali Forney Center. So that is happening this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we hope that y'all are all there. Tickets start at $5. So thank you so much. Thank all of y'all for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.